The
You're
Girl
trapped
on the
in here with
Bus,
me.
the opening, true story declaration. This is the true story of Ricardo Morales, a night security guard in Toluca, Mexico. What he experienced in March 2024 cannot be explained by science. This is not a legend. This is a documented account from his own testimony. I warn you, if you're working the night shift alone right now, don't listen to this story. Within 6 days, Ricardo will meet a girl who died 7 years ago. She will ask him to do something that if he does it, he will never be himself again. And when he agrees, he will discover that she is not the only one waiting. That night, Ricardo smelled stagnant pond water in a completely dry room. He heard water dripping from a ceiling that wasn't leaking. And when he turned around, he saw a figure standing in the darkness. A figure that never blinked. At first, Ricardo thought it was just exhaustion. Working night shifts for 8 months straight, anyone's eyes would play tricks. The dripping water, probably a pipe somewhere. The smell of pond water, maybe from the damp basement. But when that girl called his name and told him exactly where he lived, Ricardo knew it wasn't a hallucination. Introducing Ricardo Morales, Vulnerability and Isolation. Ricardo Morales was 32 years old when his life changed forever. He'd been divorced for 8 months, ever since his wife Gabriela walked out with nothing but a suitcase and the words, "You're never home. You only know how to work." No children. Both parents dead before he turned 25. He lived in a one-bedroom apartment in the outskirts of Toluca, in a building where he didn't know a single neighbor's name. He owed 2 months' rent. The landlord, Don Esteban, had stopped knocking on his door, and now just slipped increasingly threatening notes under it. Ricardo couldn't afford to find a better job. He couldn't afford to quit. That's why he worked the night shift at Plaza del Sol construction site. It paid 30% more than day shifts. 30%, that meant the difference between having a roof over his head and sleeping in his 15-year-old Chevy. The construction site was 45 minutes from the city center, a massive 3-story structure that would eventually house over 200 stores. Ricardo's shift ran from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. 8 hours completely alone in 3 floors of concrete and steel. His cell phone barely got signal in the basement level. The nearest supervisor was 15 kilometers away, reachable only by walkie-talkie that crackled more than it transmitted. He had no close friends. The few people he'd worked with at his previous job had stopped calling after the divorce. His night shift schedule made it impossible to maintain any kind of social life. The guard who'd worked his shift before him, a man named Miguel, had quit suddenly 2 weeks ago. Ricardo had asked the site manager why. Miguel said he couldn't do it anymore, the manager had said, not meeting Ricardo's eyes. Said the place got to him. Got to him how? The manager had shrugged. Didn't say. Just turned in his keys and left. Ricardo hadn't thought much about it then. Now he wished he'd asked more questions. Every night, Ricardo packed the same dinner, leftover tacos from whatever he'd made the night before, wrapped in aluminum foil that never quite kept them warm. He brought 3 thermoses of black coffee to keep himself alert. He listened to the local radio station Stereo Joya 93.7 FM to fight the loneliness. The DJ's voice, warm and full of life, was sometimes the only human sound he heard for hours. In his downtime during his breaks, Ricardo read. Ironically, he preferred horror novels. Stephen King, Clive Barker. He liked the controlled fear, the knowledge that he could close the book whenever it got too intense. He didn't know yet that some doors once opened couldn't be closed. The setting, Plaza del Sol. Plaza del Sol was 70% complete. The exterior walls stood finished, gleaming white in the daylight. But at night, with only scattered construction lights, the building looked like the skeleton of some massive creature, its empty windows like hollow eye sockets staring out at nothing. The basement level B1, as it was marked on the blueprints, was the worst. It was the darkest, the dampest, the coldest part of the entire structure. The smell down there was distinctive wet concrete mixed with rusting metal and damp earth that seemed to rise from beneath the foundation itself. Only 15 construction lights illuminated the vast space, creating pools of sickly yellow light separated by thick shadows between concrete pillars. The ventilation system wasn't operational yet. The air down there felt thick, hard to breathe, like trying to inhale underwater. The concrete floor was cold enough that Ricardo could feel it through his boots. Small puddles dotted the ground, though nobody could figure out where the water came from. The ceiling was dry, the walls were dry, but the puddles remained never evaporating, never spreading, just sitting there like cold, dark eyes. The temperature in B1 was always between 18 and 20 degrees Celsius, noticeably colder than the rest of the building. Ricardo's breath created small clouds of vapor when he did his rounds down there. The sound was what got to him most, though. The wind whistled through the gaps in the walls. The generator hummed from somewhere far away. Rats scurried in the darkness beyond his flashlight beam. And sometimes, when everything else went quiet, he could swear he heard something else, something that sounded almost like breathing. The construction workers avoided B1 when they could. Ricardo had noticed it during shift changes. When workers needed tools or materials from the basement level, they went in groups, never alone. They'd joke about it, make light of it, but he saw the way their eyes darted toward the shadows. He'd heard their conversations when they thought he wasn't listening. "That place isn't right," one worker had said. "My cousin worked on a site built over an old cemetery once. Felt just like this." "Don't be stupid," another had replied. "This was empty land before, nothing here." "Empty land doesn't mean nothing died here, hermano." Before Miguel quit, he'd given Ricardo one piece of advice. They'd been standing at the entrance to B1, the darkness yawning below them. Miguel had looked tired, older than his 40 years, with shadows under his eyes that makeup couldn't hide. "If you hear 3 knocks on any door down there," Miguel had said, "don't open it, don't even answer, just walk away." Ricardo had laughed it off. "Come on, Miguel, trying to spook the new guy?" Miguel hadn't smiled. "I'm serious, Ricardo. 3 knocks, remember that." Now, 2 weeks later, Ricardo wished he'd taken it more seriously. Monday night, March 15th, 2024, 1:30 a.m., normalcy breaks. Ricardo was making his routine inspection of B1 when he first heard it. Drip, drip, drip. The sound was steady, mechanical in its precision, 3 seconds between each drop. He swept his flashlight beam across the basement, following the sound to a small puddle on the concrete floor. The puddle was about the size of a dinner plate, perfectly circular, the water dark and still. Ricardo pointed his flashlight up at the ceiling directly above the puddle. The concrete was completely dry. No pipes, no cracks, no visible source for the water. "Must be a leak somewhere," he said aloud, needing to hear a human voice, even his own. "I'll report it to the engineers tomorrow." But even as he said it, he knew something was off. The puddle was too perfectly circular, too still. Water from a leak wouldn't form such a precise shape, and the ceiling was bone dry. Ricardo crouched down, careful not to touch the water. He aimed his flashlight at the puddle's surface. The water was so dark it looked black, almost opaque. He couldn't see the bottom, even though the puddle couldn't be more than an inch deep. A smell rose from it, organic, stagnant, like water that had been sitting in a sealed container for months. Ricardo's stomach turned. He stood up quickly, backing away. "Just a leak," he repeated. "Just a weird leak. Just a..." 2:15 a.m. The lights. Ricardo was back in his temporary office, a converted shipping container with a desk, a chair, a small heater, and a coffee maker that took 10 minutes to brew a cup. He was writing in the logbook, documenting his rounds, when the fluorescent light above him began to flicker. 3 quick flashes. A 5-second pause. 3 more flashes. Ricardo looked up, frowning. The light continued its pattern. Flash, flash, flash. Pause. Flash, flash, flash. He got up and checked the circuit breaker mounted on the container's wall. Everything looked normal. The voltage meter showed stable power. No reason for the light to flicker. Probably just a loose connection, he muttered, but the pattern bothered him. It was too regular, too deliberate, like someone was turning a switch on and off with precise timing. The light stopped flickering. Steady illumination returned. Ricardo sat back down, but he couldn't concentrate on the logbook anymore. He looked at his watch, 2:17 a.m. Something about that time stuck in his mind, though he didn't know why. 2:45 a.m., the door. Ricardo stepped outside the container to smoke. He didn't usually smoke, had quit 2 years ago, and Gabriella complained about the smell. But he'd picked it up again after the divorce. It helped him stay awake, helped him think, or stopped him from thinking too much, depending on the night. He left the container door propped open behind him. There was no wind. The night was perfectly still, the kind of stillness that felt unnatural in a city even on the outskirts. He was halfway through his cigarette when he heard it. Blam! The container door slammed shut. The sound was explosive in the quiet night, echoing off the concrete walls of the construction site. Ricardo spun around, his heart hammering. He stared at the closed door. There was no wind, not even a breeze. The air was completely motionless. Door wasn't latched properly, he said, but his voice shook. Just, the hinges are loose. He walked back to the container and pulled the door open. It moved smoothly, no resistance. He examined the hinges. They were tight, well-oiled, no play in them at all. He tested the door, swinging it gently. It stayed where he positioned it. It didn't swing on its own. He looked around the construction site. Empty, silent. Nothing moved. Ricardo stepped back inside and closed the door firmly behind him, engaging the deadbolt. He'd never locked the door from inside before. Tonight he did. 2:17 a.m. The time over the next several nights, Ricardo noticed something strange. He'd glance at his phone to check the time, and again it would be 2:17 a.m. Not approximately 2:17, exactly 2:17. At first he thought it was coincidence, but it kept happening. He'd be in the middle of a task, checking inventory or doing a round, and he'd feel compelled to look at his watch. 2:17. When 2:17 arrived each night, other things happened too. The radio would cut to static for exactly 10 seconds, then resume. The generator's hum would lower in pitch, then return to normal. The temperature would drop, he could feel it on his skin, see his breath mist in the air, then stabilize. And always at 2:17, Ricardo felt like time itself paused, like the world held its breath. Everything would go intensely quiet, a pressure building in his ears, and then release. Psychological, he told himself. I'm just hyper-aware of the time now because I noticed it once. Classic observer effect. But he didn't believe it. 2:30 a.m. The presence. Ricardo had to check that puddle again. It had been bothering him all night, sitting in the back of his mind like an itch he couldn't scratch. He needed to document it properly. Maybe take a photo for the engineers. He descended the stairs to B1, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The temperature dropped with each step. By the time he reached the bottom, he could see his breath. That's when he heard them. Footsteps. Not his own footsteps. Those were heavy, solid, the sound of work boots on concrete. These were different, lighter, softer, like bare feet on stone. And they were coming from below him, descending the stairs ahead of him. Though he could see nothing in the flashlight beam, Ricardo froze. Hello? Is someone down there? The footsteps stopped. Silence. He took another step down. The footsteps resumed, matching his pace. He stopped. They stopped. His heart was pounding now, a sick thudding in his chest. This isn't funny. Whoever you are, you're trespassing on a construction site. No answer. Just his own voice echoing back to him from the empty basement. Ricardo forced himself to continue down. The footsteps stayed just ahead of him, always out of sight. When he reached the basement floor, they stopped completely. He swept his flashlight around the vast space. Nothing. No one. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone, that somewhere in the darkness beyond his flashlight beam, something was watching him. The puddle. Ricardo found the puddle again. It had grown. What had been the size of a dinner plate was now twice that, a dark circle of water spreading across the concrete, but the dripping sound had stopped. No more 3-second intervals, just this growing pool of water with no visible source. "That's not possible," Ricardo whispered. "It's been 2 hours. If it's still dripping, I'd hear it." He knelt beside the puddle, careful to keep his distance. The smell was stronger now, that stagnant organic odor like pond water that's been sitting undisturbed for years. It made his eyes water. He reached out slowly, extending one finger toward the water's surface. He had to touch it, had to confirm it was real and not some trick of shadow and light. His fingertip broke the surface. The water was cold, not cool cold. Ice cold, like it had been refrigerated. In a basement that was already cold, this water felt like it came from somewhere much deeper, somewhere the sun had never reached. Ricardo jerked his hand back. The cold clung to his finger, a burning numbness that took several seconds to fade. And in that moment, in the instant before he pulled away, he saw something in the water. A reflection, but not his reflection. A face, a woman's face. Long hair spreading out like dark tendrils. Eyes open, looking up at him from beneath the water's surface. Ricardo stumbled backward, falling hard on his tailbone, his flashlight clattering across the floor. He scrambled to retrieve it, hands shaking, and pointed the beam back at the puddle. Normal water. Just a dark puddle reflecting the ceiling and the scattered construction lights. No face. Nothing. "Not real," Ricardo said, his voice high and tight. "Not real, just stress, just exhaustion." But his hands wouldn't stop shaking. 3:00 a.m. Rationalization. Back in the container, Ricardo wrapped his hands around a mug of hot coffee, trying to stop the trembling. He'd left B1 as quickly as he could without actually running, maintaining just enough dignity to pretend he wasn't terrified. Hallucination, he told himself. 8 months of night shifts, divorce stress, financial pressure. The brain does weird things under stress, creates patterns where there aren't any, sees faces in random shapes. He opened his phone, searching for articles about shift work and hallucinations. The screen's blue light hurt his eyes in the container's dim space, but he needed the reassurance of scientific explanation. "Shift work sleep disorder," he read aloud, "can cause visual and auditory hallucinations, especially during circadian low points between 2 and 4 a.m. That was it. That was the explanation. He was experiencing a well-documented psychological phenomenon. Nothing supernatural. Nothing impossible. Just his brain misfiring from exhaustion and stress. He almost convinced himself. He thought about calling his supervisor, but what would he say? "I saw a face in a puddle." They'd pull him off the site. He'd lose the only job keeping him housed. He couldn't afford that. He decided not to tell anyone, to pretend nothing had happened, to convince himself through sheer force of will that everything was normal. It didn't work. 5:45 a.m. The bathroom mirror. Near the end of his shift, Ricardo went to use the portable toilet, a small plastic unit set up for workers. He splashed cold water on his face from a jerry can, trying to wake himself up enough to drive home safely. He looked up at the small mirror mounted on the inside of the door. His face looked haggard. Dark circles under his eyes. 2 days of stubble. He looked older than 32. He looked like Miguel had looked before he quit. And then in the mirror he saw her, a girl, standing behind him, long hair wet and clinging to her shoulders, a white dress simple and old-fashioned. She wasn't moving, wasn't blinking, just standing there in the reflection, staring at the back of Ricardo's head. Ricardo's blood turned to ice. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His eyes locked on the reflection, on that face, on those eyes that were entirely black. No whites visible at all. Slowly, terribly slowly, the girl raised her right arm. Her hand was pale fingers, thin and delicate. She pointed down at the floor of the portable toilet. Ricardo couldn't help himself. His eyes followed the pointing finger. He looked down. On the plastic floor, written in condensation that hadn't been there moments before, were words in Spanish 217. Ayúdame. Help me. Ricardo looked back up at the mirror, his heart threatening to explode from his chest. The girl was gone. He spun around, almost falling in the cramped space. The toilet was empty except for him. No one behind him, no one anywhere. But when he looked down again, the words were still there, water droplets forming letters that couldn't be there, that made no sense, that violated every rule of reality he understood. And on his left shoulder, soaking through his uniform shirt, was a handprint, wet, cold. The individual fingers clearly visible in the damp fabric. A handprint from a hand that had never touched him. Ricardo ran. He grabbed his bag from the container, didn't bother writing in the logbook, didn't do a final check. He ran to his car, hands fumbling with the keys, dropped them twice before he got the door open. He drove away from Plaza del Sol as the sun began to rise over Toluca, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful if he'd been capable of noticing. The handprint on his shoulder stayed wet the entire drive home. When he finally got back to his apartment and peeled off the shirt, the fabric was dry everywhere except that handprint. And the skin underneath, when he touched it, was cold. Cold enough that he could feel it deep in the muscle, like ice had been pressed against him for hours. He threw the shirt in the trash. He showered in water as hot as he could stand, trying to warm that spot on his shoulder. It didn't work. The cold stayed. That night, lying in bed as the sun rose higher, Ricardo knew three things with absolute certainty. What he'd seen was real. The girl was real, and she needed his help. But more terrifying than any of that was the fourth thing he knew. He had no idea what would happen if he actually tried to help her. He had no idea what door he might open, what price he might have to pay, and yet, even knowing that, he knew he would go back. He would return to Plaza del Sol for his next shift, because he needed the money, because he had nowhere else to go, because maybe some part of him whispered this was always where he was headed, this was always waiting for him. Ricardo closed his eyes, though he knew he wouldn't sleep, and in the darkness behind his eyelids he saw her face, those black eyes, that pointing finger, those words written in impossible water, "Help me." He would help her. But he didn't know yet that helping her would change everything. That it would open him to a world he'd never asked to see. That it would bind him to the dead in ways he couldn't begin to imagine. The clock on his nightstand read 2:17 p.m. when he finally drifted into an uneasy sleep full of dreams of drowning in dark water, while a girl with black eyes watched from beneath the surface, her lips moving with words he couldn't hear but somehow understood. "You're the first one who can see me. You're the first one in 7 years. Don't leave me here. Don't let me stay alone in the dark. Please." Ricardo woke at sunset, soaked in sweat, that cold spot on his shoulder burning like ice against his skin. His phone showed 3 missed calls from the construction site manager, 1 voicemail. He listened to it with a growing sense of dread. "Ricardo, it's Fernando. Listen, I need you to call me back. One of the engineers went down to B1 this morning for an inspection. He found something strange. A puddle of water that shouldn't be there." And next to it, written in the dust on the floor, was a name, Sofía. "Does that mean anything to you? Call me back?" Ricardo's hand shook so badly he nearly dropped the phone. Sofía. Now the girl had a name. Ricardo didn't sleep that day. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face in the mirror, felt that cold handprint burning through his shirt. The voicemail from Fernando played on repeat in his mind. An engineer had found her name written in the dust. Sofía. He sat at his kitchen table as evening fell, staring at his phone. He should call Fernando back. He should tell him something. Anything. But what? That he'd seen a ghost. That a dead girl had touched him. They'd send him for a psychiatric evaluation. He'd lose his job. He'd lose everything. At 9:30 p.m., he made his decision. He would go back to Plaza del Sol. He would work his shift. And if she appeared again, he would talk to her. Really talk to her. Find out what she wanted. Find out why she chose him. Because she had chosen him. Miguel had worked that site for 6 months and quit. Other guards before him had come and gone. But Sofía had waited for Ricardo. The engineer said it had been 7 years. 7 years of waiting in the dark. Ricardo packed his bag differently that night. Along with his usual thermos of coffee and his dinner, he added something else. A small silver crucifix that had belonged to his grandmother, Doña Esperanza. She'd been a curandera, a folk healer, before she died when he was 20. She'd given him the crucifix when he was a boy, pressing it into his palm with her weathered hands. "If you ever see things others don't see, mijo," she'd said, her voice grave, "you show them this. You tell them you're protected. You understand?" He hadn't understood then. He did now. Tuesday night, March 16th, 9:45 p.m. Ricardo arrived at Plaza del Sol 15 minutes early. The parking lot was empty except for his Chevy. The construction site loomed against the darkening sky, its empty windows reflecting the last purple light of sunset. It looked different tonight. More skeletal. More hungry. He sat in his car for a long moment, engine still running, heater blasting. He could drive away, call in sick, quit like Miguel did, find another job even if it paid less, even if he couldn't make rent. But he knew he wouldn't. Something had begun the night before, something that wouldn't let him go now, whether he showed up for work or not. The cold spot on his shoulder was proof of that. She'd followed him home. She'd touched him. The connection was made. Ricardo turned off the engine and stepped into the night. The air felt wrong. There was no wind just like the night before, but the stillness wasn't peaceful. It was expectant, waiting. The streetlight nearest the construction site flickered 3 times as he walked toward the entrance, then went dark completely. He unlocked the chain-link fence gate, stepped through, locked it behind him. Standard procedure. Keep unauthorized people out. He walked to the shipping container office, his footsteps too loud in the quiet. Inside, everything looked normal. The desk, the chair, the coffee maker, the logbook where the day shift supervisor had written Inspection B 17:30 a.m. Found water accumulation. Engineers notified. Also unusual marking on floor. Name Sofía or Sofía written in dust. Possibly vandalism. Recommend security review. Ricardo's hand trembled as he read it. Not a hallucination then. The engineers had seen evidence too. Her name was real. The water was real. He signed into the logbook, his signature shaky, Ricardo Morales, 10:0 p.m., 6:0 a.m., beginning rounds. He picked up his flashlight, tested it. The beam was strong and steady. He picked up his backup flashlight, too, the one he'd never needed before. He clipped the walkie-talkie to his belt, though he knew from experience it barely worked in B1. Before leaving the container, Ricardo pulled out his grandmother's crucifix. He held it for a moment, feeling the weight of the silver, the smoothness worn by decades of handling. Then he put it in his shirt pocket right over his heart. "Okay, abuela," he whispered. "Let's see if you were right." 11:0 p.m. The quiet. The first hour of Ricardo's shift passed without incident. He did his standard rounds of the first and second floors, checking that all equipment was secured, that no vagrants had broken in, that nothing had been vandalized or stolen. Everything was in order. But the silence bothered him. Construction sites were never truly quiet. There were always sounds, settling concrete wind through exposed spaces, the distant hum of the city. Tonight there was nothing. The air itself seemed muffled, as if someone had wrapped the entire building in cotton. Ricardo tried the radio. Stereo Joya came through, but the music sounded distant, tinny. The DJ's voice was distorted underwater. He turned it off. The silence that rushed back was worse. At 11:45, Ricardo forced himself to eat. The tacos tasted like cardboard. His mouth was too dry. He drank coffee, but it didn't help. The liquid sat heavy in his stomach. He checked his phone. Full battery. But only one bar of signal, and he was still on the first floor. That wasn't normal. He usually had 3 bars here. Ricardo looked at the container door. He'd propped it open when he arrived, wanting to feel less trapped. Now he walked over and stared out into the darkness of the construction site. The other buildings nearby were dark. The streetlights that should have been visible were out. Even the glow of the city seemed dimmer than usual, as if Toluca itself had moved farther away. Just an overcast night, he said aloud. But there were no clouds. The sky was clear stars visible. They just seemed fainter than they should be. Ricardo closed and locked the container door. He sat at the desk and opened his book, a worn copy of Pet Sematary. He'd read it before, but the familiarity was comforting, or it usually was. Tonight the words wouldn't stick. He read the same paragraph 3 times without comprehending it. He gave up and closed the book. 12:47 a.m. Still over an hour until 2:17. The time that had become significant, though he still didn't fully understand why. Ricardo decided to do another round. Staying still was worse than moving. 1:00 a.m. The second floor. Ricardo worked his way through the second floor methodically. West wing first, then east, then the central corridor. His flashlight beam swept across bare, concrete-exposed rebar stacks of materials covered with tarps. Everything as it should be. Except the temperature. It was dropping. Ricardo could see his breath now, even on the second floor. That wasn't right. It was March, and while nights in Toluca could be cool, they weren't this cold. Not inside a building. He radioed the supervisor station. "Base, this is Ricardo. Do you copy static?" Then faintly, "Copy. Go ahead." "The temperature inside the building is dropping. Is there any maintenance work on the HVAC?" More static. The words that came back were broken, barely intelligible. "No mainte. Scheduled. Problem. Never mind, probably just the weather. Ricardo out." He clipped the walkie-talkie back to his belt. The static continued for a moment after he'd released the button, a crackling that almost sounded like whispered words. Then it cut off sharply. Ricardo moved toward the central stairwell. He needed to check the 3rd floor. Then he could avoid B1 for a bit longer. Maybe nothing would happen tonight. Maybe whatever had started yesterday was finished. Maybe she'd gotten what she needed just by making contact. He didn't believe it, but the hope was something to hold on to. He reached the stairwell entrance. The door was propped open with a cement block. Beyond it, darkness rose up the stairs. His flashlight beam couldn't penetrate very far. The 3rd floor was the least complete part of the structure, just a shell of concrete and steel with no walls yet. Ricardo put his foot on the first step. That's when all the lights went out. 1:15 a.m. Total darkness. Every construction light in the entire building cut out simultaneously. The sudden darkness was absolute crushing. Ricardo's flashlight seemed pathetically weak against it, a thin beam that barely pushed back the black. His heart rate spiked. He spun in a circle, the flashlight beam whipping around. Nothing. No movement. No sound. "Breaker must have tripped," he said, but his voice came out high and frightened. He pulled out his walkie-talkie. "Base, this is Ricardo. We've lost all power at the site. Complete blackout. Do you copy?" Static. Pure static. No voice underneath, no words. Just a wall of white noise. "Base, do you copy anyone?" Nothing. Ricardo tried his cell phone. The screen lit up painfully bright in the darkness. No signal. Not one bar. Not even the little searching indicator. Just blank space where the signal bars should be. "No," Ricardo whispered. "No, no, no." He tried calling 911 anyway. The phone showed the call connecting, then immediately failed. "Call failed" flashed on the screen. He was alone, completely cut off, in total darkness except for his flashlight. And then he heard it, singing. A woman's voice, soft and melodic, drifting up from below. From B1. The song was in Spanish, something old, a lullaby maybe. The words were indistinct, but the melody was clear, beautiful, and sad. Ricardo's blood turned to ice. He stood frozen at the entrance to the stairwell, flashlight gripped so tightly his hand ached. The singing stopped. A voice, the same voice, but speaking now instead of singing, called up from the darkness below, Ricardo Morales. His name. She knew his name. Not just that he existed, not just that he could see her. His full name. "You saw me yesterday," the voice continued, echoing slightly in the stairwell. "You saw me in the mirror. You can't pretend anymore." Ricardo's throat was so tight he could barely force words out. "Who are you?" "You already know my name. The engineers found it. Sofía Mendoza." "What do you want?" A pause, then softer. "I need your help. I've waited so long for someone who could see me. 7 years, Ricardo. 7 years alone in the dark." 1:30 a.m. The descent begins. Ricardo knew he should run. Every instinct screamed at him to go up, not down. To get out of the building, get to his car, drive away, and never come back. But even as he thought it, he knew it wouldn't work. She'd found him. She'd followed him home. She'd left that handprint on his shoulder. Running wouldn't save him now. And beneath the fear there was something else. Curiosity. Pity. The need to understand. She'd been alone for 7 years. Whatever she was, whatever had happened to her, that loneliness resonated with something in Ricardo's own hollow chest. "I'm coming down," he called into the darkness. "Thank you," came the reply, so quiet he almost missed it. Ricardo descended the stairs slowly, one step at a time. His flashlight beam bounced with each step, creating moving shadows that seemed alive. The temperature continued to drop. By the time he reached the first-floor landing, he could see clouds of vapor with each breath. The singing started again, closer now. That same sad lullaby floating through the darkness. Ricardo continued down, down toward B1, down toward her. The stairwell seemed longer than usual, the steps multiplying the distance, stretching. His footsteps echoed strangely, taking too long to fade. And underneath his footsteps he heard others, soft, bare feet on concrete, someone walking up while he walked down. No, not walking up, walking down ahead of him, leading him. "Stop," Ricardo said, his voice cracking. "Just stop for a second." The footsteps stopped. The singing stopped. Silence rushed in so complete that Ricardo could hear his own heartbeat, could hear the blood rushing in his ears. "Why me?" he asked the darkness. "Miguel worked here for months. Other guards before him. Why did you wait for me?" The voice, when it came, seemed to come from all around him, from the walls themselves. "Because you're like your grandmother. You see what others can't. You have the gift." "It's not a gift," Ricardo said bitterly. "It's a curse." "Perhaps. But it makes you the only one who can help me. Please, Ricardo, keep walking. I won't hurt you, I promise." He didn't trust the promise. Ghosts in stories never kept their promises. But he also knew he had no choice. This had started. It would finish one way or another. Ricardo continued down into B1. 2:00 a.m., basement level. The bottom of the stairwell opened into the vast darkness of B1. Ricardo's flashlight beam was swallowed by the space barely illuminating 10 feet ahead. The concrete pillars created a forest of shadow. The puddles on the floor reflected his light like dead eyes. The cold was intense now, 10 degrees, maybe less. Ricardo's fingers were going numb where they gripped the flashlight. "Sofía," he called. "Where are you?" "Here." He spun toward the voice. His flashlight beam caught her. She stood about 15 feet away in a small pool of light that seemed to come from nowhere, no source, just ambient glow surrounding her. She was exactly as she had appeared in the mirror, but seeing her fully in 3 dimensions was different, more real, more wrong. She looked about 24 or 25. Her hair was black, long hanging wetly past her shoulders, water dripping steadily from the ends. Her dress was simple white, the kind of dress someone might wear to work in a shop or restaurant. It clung to her, soaked through. Her feet were bare, pale, blue tinged with cold. And her eyes were entirely black. No whites, no irises, just black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. She wasn't breathing. Her chest didn't rise and fall. She didn't blink. Ricardo's flashlight trembled in his hand. You're really here?" "Yes." Her lips moved, but the sound seemed slightly disconnected, like watching a dubbed movie. "I'm here. I'm always here. This is where I died, Ricardo. March 15th, 2017, 2:17 in the morning." "How?" Ricardo forced the word out. "How did you die?" Sofia's expression didn't change. It couldn't. There was no life in that face to animate it. But her voice carried something. Sadness. Ancient, bone-deep sadness. "There was a man. He followed me for months. I didn't know his name then. I only knew I was afraid. He would be at the bus stop when I left work. He would be walking behind me on the street. He never spoke to me, never approached, but I knew he was there." She paused. Water continued to drip from her hair, hitting the concrete with soft plip sounds. "The night I died, I called my mother from the bus. I told her someone was following me. She told me to go to the police station instead of coming home, but I didn't make it. When I got off the bus at Calle Independencia, he was waiting." Ricardo's stomach twisted. "What happened?" "He said he loved me. He said he'd loved me from the first moment he saw me. He said we were meant to be together forever." Sofia's voice remained flat, reciting facts. "I tried to run. We were near this lot. It was just empty land, then abandoned. He caught me, put his hand over my mouth. I couldn't breathe. I tried to fight, but he was strong. Too strong." "He suffocated you," Ricardo whispered. "He didn't mean to kill me." "He was just trying to keep me quiet, but he held on too long. And when I stopped struggling, when he realized what he'd done." She gestured down at the floor. "He panicked. He dug a hole. Right here where you're standing. 4 meters deep, he put me in it. Then he waited 9 months until they started building here, and he made sure he was on the construction crew. He covered me with concrete himself." Ricardo looked down at his feet. 4 meters below him, her body lay buried in earth and darkness. He was standing on her grave. "Who was he?" Ricardo asked, though part of him already knew. "Tomas Ruiz. He was the chief engineer for this project. After he buried me, he couldn't live with what he'd done. 9 months later, he jumped from the 3rd floor of this building. Killed himself." She paused. "But he didn't find peace either. He's still here." 2:15 a.m. The approach. Ricardo backed up a step. He's here now. Always. He won't let me leave. Even in death, he thinks he owns me." A sound from behind Ricardo. Footsteps. Heavy. Boots on concrete. Ricardo spun flashlight beams sweeping across the basement. A man stood at the far end of B1 near the wall. Middle-aged, maybe late 40s. He wore construction clothes, jeans, flannel shirt, yellow hard hat. On his left wrist, visible even at this distance, was a long scar. Tomas Ruiz. He didn't look ghostly. He looked solid, real, as if he were just another worker who'd stayed late. But no living person could have appeared so suddenly, so silently, in a locked building with no power. Tomas began walking toward them, not hurrying, each step deliberate, heavy. The sound of his boots echoed wrong, delayed slightly, as if the sound were catching up with the motion. "Sofía," Tomas called, his voice rough, like gravel scraping. "Who is this?" "Someone who can help me," Sofía replied. There was defiance in her tone now. "Someone who can free me." "Free you?" Tomas laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You're mine, Sofía. You were always mine. Death doesn't change that." Ricardo found his voice, though it came out shakier than he wanted. "You don't own her. You killed her. That's not love. That's murder." Tomas's eyes fixed on Ricardo. In the poor light, they looked empty, hollow. "You don't understand. I loved her more than life itself. When I couldn't have her in the living world, I made sure we'd be together in death. That's true love. That's sacrifice." "That's insanity," Ricardo shot back. The lights came back on. Every construction light in B1 blazed to life, simultaneously harsh and white, banishing shadows. The sudden brightness was blinding after the darkness. Ricardo threw up a hand to shield his eyes. When his vision cleared, Tomas had moved. He was now only 10 feet away. His face was visible clearly now. Pale, drawn, eyes sunken. The face of someone who died violently and carried that violence with him. "You need to leave," Tomas said. "This doesn't concern you." "I'm not going anywhere," Ricardo said, trying to sound braver than he felt. His grandmother's crucifix pressed against his chest, a small point of warmth in the cold. "She asked for my help. I'm going to help her." "Then you'll stay here with us." Tomas took another step forward. "Forever." 2:17 a.m. The attack. Tomas moved faster than should have been possible. One moment he was 10 feet away. The next his hand was around Ricardo's throat. The hand was cold. Not just cold glacial like being touched by ice carved from the heart of a frozen lake. The cold burned. It sank through Ricardo's skin into his muscle down to the bone. Ricardo couldn't breathe, couldn't move, his muscles locked up, paralyzed. The flashlight fell from his numb fingers, clattering on the concrete and rolling away. His vision began to darken at the edges. This was it. This was how he died. Strangled by a ghost in a basement, his body not found until the morning shift arrived. "Ricardo!" Sofia's voice cut through the paralysis, through the roaring in his ears, through the darkness closing in. "Close your eyes. Don't look at his eyes." Ricardo didn't understand, but some instinct made him obey. He squeezed his eyes shut. The paralysis broke. The cold hand vanished from his throat. Ricardo gasped, sucking in air, and stumbled backward. His legs barely held him. He kept his eyes closed, afraid to open them. "You can open them now," Sofía said, her voice closer. "But don't look directly at him. He uses his eyes. It's how he traps people." Ricardo opened his eyes cautiously, keeping his gaze on the floor. He could see Tomas in his peripheral vision standing motionless now, watching. "How did you know?" Ricardo rasped, his throat aching. "Because that's how he trapped me," Sofía said quietly. 7 years ago, in the moment before he killed me, I looked into his eyes, and I've been trapped ever since." Ricardo looked up at Sofía, really looked at her for the first time, at those completely black eyes. And he understood. Those weren't her real eyes. Those were Tomas's doing, his way of marking her, claiming her even in death. "What do I need to do?" Ricardo asked. "How do I free you?" "Find my body," Sofía said, "and bury it in blessed ground. Only then can I leave this place. Only then will his hold on me break." Tomas roared, an inhuman sound, rage and desperation mixed together. "No, I won't let you, she's mine." The lights began to flicker, fast strobing. In the flashes of light and dark, Ricardo saw other figures appearing throughout B1. Shadowy forms, dozens of them, all the other dead buried beneath this cursed ground. "Run!" Sofía shouted. "To the stairs, now!" Ricardo ran. He scooped up his fallen flashlight and sprinted for the stairwell. Behind him he heard Tomas roaring, heard footsteps pursuing, but between him and Tomas, Sofía stood her ground. Ricardo glanced back as he reached the stairs. Sofía and Tomas faced each other in the center of B1. They weren't touching, but the air between them rippled, distorted, like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. "You have to help me," Sofía called to Ricardo. "Find my bones, bury them in holy ground. It's the only way." "If you do," Tomas bellowed, turning his hollow eyes toward Ricardo, "I'll kill you, I'll make you one of us, you'll stay here with us forever." Ricardo didn't wait to hear more. He took the stairs 3 at a time, lungs burning, legs screaming. Up from B1, up to the first floor, up to the entrance. The front door was locked. From the inside, the deadbolt engaged, even though Ricardo knew he'd left it unlocked per protocol. He fumbled with it, hands shaking so badly he could barely grip the metal. Finally it turned. He yanked the door open and burst out into the night. The air outside felt warm compared to B1, even though it was probably 50 degrees. Ricardo stumbled to his car, got the door open, fell into the driver's seat. He started the engine with shaking hands, threw it into reverse, and peeled out of the parking lot. 5:30 a.m. The morning after, Ricardo drove aimlessly for hours. He couldn't go home, couldn't face the loneliness of his apartment, the silence where he'd have nothing to do but think about what had just happened. Instead, he drove through Toluca as the city woke up, watched the sun rise, watched people heading to work, normal people with normal lives who had never been strangled by a ghost, who had never heard a dead girl sing in the dark. At 7 a.m., he found himself parked outside the public library. He sat in his car until it opened at 8, then went inside. The warmth, the smell of books, the ordinary sounds of people typing on computers and whispering to each other, it all felt surreal, like he'd stepped from one world into another. Ricardo found a computer terminal and began searching. Sofía Mendoza, missing Toluca, 2017. The first result was a news article from March 17, 2017. Local woman missing after night shift. Sofía Mendoza, 24, disappeared early Thursday morning after leaving her job at Palacio de Hierro department store. Her mother reported receiving a call from Mendoza at 2:03 a.m. in which she stated someone was following her. Cell phone tracking placed her last signal near an empty lot on Avenida Constitucion, but a search of the area revealed no evidence. Police are asking anyone with information to come forward. Ricardo's hands shook as he clicked through more articles. There were follow-ups for the first 2 months, family appeals, police updates, search parties. Then the articles stopped. The case went cold. By June 2017, Sofía Mendoza was just another missing person, another unsolved case, another ghost. He searched for Tomás Ruiz next. Construction engineer dies in fall. Tomás Ruiz, 48. Chief engineer for the Plaza del Sol project, died December 20, 2017 after falling from the building's 3rd floor. Police ruled the death a suicide, noting that Ruiz had shown signs of depression and erratic behavior in the months preceding his death. He is survived by an ex-wife who declined to claim the body. There was more. Ricardo found an interview with a construction worker named Alfonso, who'd worked with Tomás. He wasn't right in the head those last few months. He'd go down to the basement alone and talk to himself. One time I heard him crying, saying, "Please forgive me, I didn't mean to." I asked him what was wrong. He just looked at me with these empty eyes and said, "She's still here, she's waiting for me." I thought he meant his ex-wife. Now I don't know what he meant. Ricardo sat back in the library chair, his mind reeling. It was all true. Everything Sofía had told him. She'd been murdered. Her body had been buried where Plaza del Sol now stood, and Tomás had killed himself 9 months later, unable to live with the guilt. But instead of finding peace, they were both trapped, locked together in a nightmare that had lasted 7 years. Ricardo needed help, professional help. Not a psychiatrist, he was past questioning his sanity. He needed someone who understood the supernatural, someone who could tell him how to break a curse, how to free a ghost, how to give Sofía the burial she deserved. He thought of his grandmother's crucifix still in his pocket. She'd been a curandera. She'd known things. She'd tried to teach him, but he'd been too young, too interested in soccer and video games to pay attention. But she'd mentioned someone once. Another curandera, someone she trusted. What was the name? Marta. That was it. Marta something. She lived in the hills outside Toluca near Cerro de la Cruz. Ricardo left the library and found a payphone. His cell phone was still showing no signal, as if whatever had happened in B1 had damaged it somehow. He called directory assistance, asking for anyone named Marta near Cerro de la Cruz who might be a healer or curandera. The operator was skeptical, but did the search. "There's a Marta Flores listed on Camino Viejo near the old church. No business name, just residential. That might be who you're looking for." Ricardo wrote down the address. He had 7 hours until his next shift. 7 hours to find this woman, to learn what he needed to know, to figure out how to save Sofía, and to save himself, because Tomás's threat echoed in his mind. "I'll make you one of us." Ricardo didn't know exactly what that meant, but he knew it was nothing good. He'd felt Thomas's hand around his throat, felt that inhuman cold sinking into him. Part of it was still there, a chill that wouldn't quite leave, centered at his throat where the ghost had touched him. He got in his car and drove toward the hills. 10:00 a.m., Cerro de la Cruz. The drive took almost an hour. The roads became narrower, rougher. Paved streets gave way to dirt paths lined with scrub brush and cactus. The houses were sparse out here, small structures that looked like they'd been standing for generations. Ricardo found Camino Viejo and followed it up the winding hillside. At the top, near an old church that looked abandoned, was a small house. The yard was full of plants, herbs, he thought, though he didn't recognize most of them. Wind chimes made from bone and glass hung from the porch roof, creating a quiet, eerie music. A wooden sign by the gate read, Marta Flores Curandera. Ricardo parked and approached the house. Before he could knock, the door opened. A woman in her mid-60s stood in the doorway. She had long gray hair pulled back in a braid, wearing a simple dress and shawl. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, assessing. "You're Esperanza's grandson," she said. Not a question, a statement. Ricardo stopped, startled. "How did you know?" "You have her eyes, and you carry her crucifix." Marta pointed at Ricardo's chest, where the chain was visible at his collar. "She told me about you before she died. Said you had the gift but didn't know it yet." She stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in. We have much to discuss." The interior of the house was dim and cool. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jars, bottles, dried herbs, bone stones. Candles burned in various corners. The smell was intense smoke herbs, something else Ricardo couldn't identify. Marta led him to a small table. "Sit. Tell me everything." Ricardo did. He told her about Plaza del Sol, about the puddle and the footsteps, about seeing Sofía in the mirror. He told her about going back, about the basement, about Tomás attacking him. He pulled out his phone and showed her the articles he'd found. His voice shook as he recounted it all, months of isolated night shifts and divorce and loneliness, culminating in this impossible, terrifying situation. When he finished, Marta was quiet for a long moment. She'd listened without interrupting, without any expression of disbelief. Now she nodded slowly. "Your grandmother saw things too. She knew you would inherit it, the ability to see beyond the veil between life and death." Marta stood and moved to one of her shelves, running her fingers along jars. "What you're describing is a classic spirit binding. The man Tomás, in his obsession, he's bound Sofía's spirit to that place. Even death didn't end his possession of her." "How do I break it?" Ricardo asked. "She said I need to find her body and bury it in holy ground, but she's under 4 meters of concrete. I can't just dig her up." "You don't need to physically dig," Marta said. She selected 3 items from her shelf, a clay jar filled with dark earth, a silver crucifix that looked ancient, and an obsidian knife. "There's another way, a ritual, but it's dangerous." "I'll do it," Ricardo said immediately. Marta looked at him seriously. "You don't understand the cost. This ritual, it requires 3 things. Blessed earth, a consecrated crucifix, and blood, your blood. You'll stand between the living and the dead, open a doorway for her to pass through. But in doing so, you make yourself visible to all the dead, not just her. Every spirit trapped in that place will try to follow her through. Some will try to pull you through instead." Ricardo's throat tightened. "What happens if they succeed?" "Your body dies. Your spirit becomes trapped like theirs." Marta set the items on the table. "Are you still willing?" Ricardo thought of Sofía's face, thought of her voice saying she'd been alone for 7 years. Thought of Tomás's possessive rage, his refusal to let her go even in death. Someone had to help her, and Ricardo was the only one who could see her. "Yes," he said. "I'm willing." Marta nodded. "Then we begin preparation. The ritual must be performed at 2:17 a.m., the exact time of her death. You'll need to draw a circle of salt for protection. Light 13 candles. Place the blessed earth and crucifix in the center, and you'll need to recite this prayer." She handed him a piece of paper with words written in Spanish and something else, something older. Nahuatl, maybe. Memorize it, Marta instructed. Every word must be exact. And whatever you do, whatever you see, whatever voices call to you, do not step outside the salt circle until the ritual is complete. If you do, they'll drag you down. Ricardo took the paper with trembling hands. The words looked complicated, unfamiliar. He had 13 hours to memorize them. 13 hours until his next shift. 13 hours until 2:17 a.m. One more thing, Marta said. She took his hand and pressed something into his palm, a small cloth bag tied with red string. Keep this with you during the ritual. It's a protection charm. It won't stop them, but it might slow them down enough for you to complete the prayer. Thank you, Ricardo said. Don't thank me yet, Marta replied grimly. If this works, you'll free her. But you'll also change yourself forever. Once you open that door, you'll never fully close it again. You'll see them always, the dead, the trapped, the lost. They'll know you can help them, and they'll come to you. Ricardo swallowed hard. Forever. Forever. That's the price of the gift. That's what your grandmother lived with. That's what you'll live with if you survive tonight. Marta walked him to the door. May the saints protect you, Ricardo. You're going to need them. Ricardo drove down from Cerro de la Cruz with the blessed items in a bag on his passenger seat and Marta's prayer folded in his pocket. The sun was high now, approaching noon. In less than 12 hours he would face whatever waited for him in B1. He should have been terrified. Part of him was. But another part felt something different. Purpose. For the first time since Gabriela left, since his life had become an empty cycle of work and sleep and loneliness, Ricardo had something to do that mattered. Someone depending on him. He would free Sofía Mendoza, or he would die trying. And as he drove back toward Toluca, his phone lying dead on the seat beside him, Ricardo didn't notice the figure standing by the side of the road watching his car pass. A girl in a white dress, her hair wet and hanging long, her eyes completely black. Sofía making sure he kept his promise. Behind her, barely visible in the bright daylight, stood another figure. A man in construction clothes, watching with hollow eyes, waiting for night to fall, waiting for Ricardo to return, waiting to make sure that if Sofía left, Ricardo would take her place. The cold spot on Ricardo's throat pulsed once, as if in warning. Ricardo spent the afternoon in his apartment, curtains drawn, memorizing Marta's prayer. The words felt foreign on his tongue, Spanish mixed with Nahuatl, the ancient language of the Aztecs. Some phrases he understood, almas atadas las llamo, bound souls I call you. Others were incomprehensible syllables that seemed to carry weight beyond their sound. He practiced aloud over and over until his voice went hoarse. The prayer had to be perfect. One wrong word, Marta had warned, and the door would open wrong, crooked, and things that should stay buried would come through. At 4 p.m., Ricardo tried to sleep. He needed rest before his shift. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Tomas's face. Felt those ice-cold fingers around his throat. Heard Sofía's voice, 7 years alone in the dark. At 6 p.m., he gave up on sleep. He showered the hot water, doing nothing to warm the cold spot on his throat. He dressed in his security uniform. He packed his bag, the blessed earth in its clay jar, the ancient silver crucifix, the obsidian knife salt. He'd bought 5 pounds of sea salt from the grocery store, 13 white candles, matches Marta's protection charm, and his grandmother's crucifix, which he hung around his neck. Before leaving, Ricardo wrote a letter, just in case. He addressed it to his ex-wife, Gabriela, though he doubted she'd care. In it he explained everything, the haunting, Sofía, Tomas, the ritual. He sealed it in an envelope and left it on his kitchen table with a note. If I don't come back, please give this to the police. At 8:30 p.m., Ricardo checked his reflection one last time. He looked like a man going to war, eyes hollow from lack of sleep. Jaw set with determination that barely masked terror. The crucifix gleamed silver at his throat. Okay, abuela. he whispered to his reflection. "If you can hear me, if you're watching, help me tonight. Please." He grabbed his bag and headed for the door. 9:45 p.m. Returning to Plaza del Sol. The construction site looked different at night now. Malevolent. The chain-link fence seemed less like security and more like a cage. The building's empty windows were black voids watching. Even the streetlights seemed dimmer, their glow swallowed by some hungry darkness. Ricardo sat in his car with the engine running heater on full blast, trying to gather courage. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. He didn't want to go in there. Every cell in his body screamed at him to drive away, to quit, to let someone else deal with this nightmare. But there was no one else. Just him. Just Ricardo Morales, divorced security guard chosen by circumstance and genetics to stand between a murdered girl and eternal imprisonment. At 9:50, he forced himself out of the car. The night air hit him like a physical thing. Cold. Wrong. The temperature was probably 60 degrees mild for March, but it felt Arctic. Ricardo's breath misted. That shouldn't happen, not at 60 degrees. He approached the gate. The lock was still engaged, just as he'd left it yesterday. But as he reached for it, he noticed something. The metal was covered in a thin layer of frost. Ice crystals sparkled in the dim light. Ricardo touched the lock. It was freezing, painfully cold. He had to use his jacket sleeve to grip it, twist it open. The gate swung inward with a long, rusty creak. Ricardo stepped through and relocked it behind him. Standard procedure. Keep unauthorized people out. Though tonight the danger wasn't from the outside. He walked across the parking lot toward the building entrance. His footsteps sounded too loud. Behind him he heard an echo footsteps matching his own but lighter. Bare feet on concrete. Ricardo stopped. The echo stopped. He started again. The echo resumed. "Sofía," he called. No answer. Just those phantom footsteps following him. Ricardo reached the entrance. The door was unlocked. He'd made sure the day shift supervisor knew to leave it that way. He pulled it open and stepped into the darkness of Plaza del Sol. 10:00 p.m. Preparation. Ricardo went to the container office first. He turned on the single lamp, casting weak yellow light. He set his bag on the desk and inventoried the contents. Everything was there. Everything except courage. He signed into the logbook with a shaking hand. Ricardo Morales, 10:00 p.m., 6:00 a.m., beginning final security assessment. Final. The word felt prophetic. Ricardo picked up the walkie-talkie. "Base, this is Ricardo. Radio check, over." Static. Then after a long delay, "Ricardo. Copy. All good there." "All good," Ricardo lied. "Just checking in. Over and out." He clipped the walkie-talkie to his belt, though he knew it would be useless in B1. He took his flashlight, the backup flashlight, the bag of ritual items. He left the container and locked it behind him. Then he walked toward the stairwell that led down to the basement. With each step, the temperature dropped. Ricardo could feel it happening, a gradual descent into cold that had nothing to do with weather. This was supernatural cold, the cold of the grave, the cold of death itself. At 10:15, Ricardo reached B1. The basement looked the same as always. Concrete pillars, scattered construction lights, puddles on the floor. But the air felt thick, expectant. Like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks, charged, waiting. Ricardo found the spot. He knew it by instinct, by the way the cold intensified, by the way his skin crawled. This was where Sofía had stood 2 nights ago. This was directly above where her body lay buried, 4 meters down, wrapped in earth and concrete, waiting for 7 years to be found. Ricardo set down his bag and began his preparations. 10:30 p.m. The circle. First the salt. Ricardo poured it slowly, carefully creating a perfect circle 6 feet in diameter. He walked clockwise, letting the salt flow from the bag in a steady stream. Marta had been specific, no breaks in the circle. Even a small gap would allow things through. The salt glowed faintly in the construction lights. Or maybe that was his imagination. Maybe fear made him see things that weren't there. No, he'd seen real ghosts. He knew the difference now between imagination and reality. The circle complete, Ricardo placed the 13 candles around its perimeter, spacing them evenly. White pillar candles, each about 6 inches tall. He lit them one by one, moving clockwise again. The flames caught easily, burning steady despite the lack of air movement. With each candle lit, the basement seemed to darken. The shadows between the construction lights grew thicker, more solid, and Ricardo could swear he saw shapes moving in those shadows. Figures. Watching. He forced himself to focus. 13 candles lit, now the center of the circle. Ricardo stepped carefully over the salt line into the circle's interior. He placed the clay jar of blessed earth in the exact center. The earth was dark, almost black, and smelled of incense and age. Marta had collected it from Pantheon Municipal, the main cemetery from ground, where the blessed had been laid to rest for over 100 years. Beside the jar, Ricardo placed the ancient crucifix, silver tarnished with age, with inscriptions in Latin he couldn't read. It had belonged to Marta's grandmother, who had been a curandera before her. 3 generations of power in that small cross. Finally, the obsidian knife, black volcanic glass, sharp enough to cut, sharp enough to draw blood. Ricardo's blood. The third component of the ritual. He sat cross-legged in the center of the salt circle, the ritual items before him. He pulled Marta's prayer from his pocket, though he'd memorized it. He unfolded the paper, the words visible in the candlelight. His watch read 10:47 p.m., 3.5 hours until 2:17 a.m. 3.5 hours to wait in a haunted basement, surrounded by salt and candles preparing to open a door between worlds. Ricardo had never been good at waiting. 11:30 p.m. The Watched. The construction lights began to flicker. Not in the pattern from before, this was random, chaotic. Some lights would dim while others brightened. Shadows danced and jumped. The effect was disorienting, nauseating. Ricardo sat in his circle and watched the basement transform. In the flickering light, the concrete pillars looked like trees in a dead forest. The puddles looked like open graves, and the shadows were definitely moving. He could see them now more clearly than before. Figures, dozens of them, standing between the pillars. Some looked almost normal, men and women in clothes from different eras. Others were wrong, distorted, showing the manner of their deaths and the way their bodies bent and twisted. An old man with his throat cut, blood still wet on his shirt. A woman with her neck at an impossible angle. A child, face blue, who'd drowned or been smothered. And more. So many more. The dead of Plaza del Sol. Everyone who'd been buried in this ground over the decades, all the unmarked graves, all the forgotten bodies. Sofía had been right. She wasn't alone down there. They didn't approach the salt circle. Not yet. They just watched, waited, patient as only the dead can be patient. Ricardo's hands shook. He clasped them together, trying to control the trembling. He couldn't show weakness, couldn't show fear. They could sense it, he was sure, like predators sensing wounded prey. At 11:45, one of them spoke. "You're going to free her," the old man with the cut throat. His voice was wet, gurgling. "Are you going to free us, too?" Ricardo swallowed hard. I don't know. I'm here for Sofía." "Why just her?" A woman's voice, sad and bitter. "We've been here longer. We deserve peace, too." "I can't," Ricardo started. "You open the door." The child's voice, high and sweet and terrible. "You called us. We're all bound here, all of us together. If you free her, you free us all. Or you free none of us." Ricardo's heart sank. Marta hadn't mentioned this, or maybe she had and he hadn't understood. "Spirits trapped in that place will try to follow her through," she'd said. She hadn't said they had to follow, that they were all connected, that freeing Sofía meant freeing them all. How many were there? Ricardo counted the visible figures. 15, 20, but there were more in the deeper shadows. More he couldn't quite see. Could he free them all? The prayer didn't specify. It just said, "Open the way, show the light, let the bound souls pass." Maybe that meant all of them. Or maybe he was about to make a terrible mistake. 12:30 a.m. Sofía appears. She materialized at the edge of the salt circle. One moment nothing, the next moment Sofía Mendoza stood there, water dripping from her hair and dressed, those black eyes fixed on Ricardo. "You came back," she said softly. "I wasn't sure you would." "I made a promise," Ricardo replied. His voice steadied in her presence. She was why he was here, the reason for all this. Sofía looked around at the other spirits. "They're all waking up. You did that. Your preparations called them." "They said if I free you, I have to free them all." "Yes." Sofía's expression, or what passed for expression on that dead face, was sorrowful. "We're all bound together. This ground won't let any of us leave unless all of us leave. That's the nature of a cursed place. Death feeds death. Suffering feeds suffering." "I can do that," Ricardo said, trying to sound confident. "I'll free all of you." "You don't understand what you're offering." Sofía stepped closer to the salt line but didn't cross it. "Some of these spirits have been here for 50 years, 70. They're not whole anymore. They've forgotten what they were. They're just hunger and rage now. When you open the door, they won't go peacefully. They'll fight. They'll try to drag you through instead. Then why tell me to come? Why ask for my help?" "Because you're the only chance we have. And because," Sofía paused, "because I'm selfish. Even knowing the danger to you, I want out. I want to stop being Tomas's prisoner. I want to rest." Ricardo understood. 7 years of imprisonment would make anyone desperate. "Where is Tomas?" "Coming. He knows what you're planning. He's gathering his strength." Sofía looked toward the stairwell. "He'll try to stop you. He'll do anything to keep me here." "Can he break the salt circle?" "No, but he doesn't have to. He just has to wait until 2:17. When you start the ritual, when you cut yourself and bleed on the blessed earth, when you speak the words, that's when you're most vulnerable. That's when the door opens both ways. He'll try to pull you through." "The curandera gave me protection." Ricardo touched the charm bag at his belt. "That will help, but it won't be enough. Not against Tomas. Not against all of them." Sofía knelt beside the circle, her face level with Ricardo's. "You need to understand something. When you open that door, you become the anchor, the bridge. Your life force is what allows us to cross. And if too many of us try to cross at once, if we take too much from you—" "I'll die," Ricardo finished. "Yes, or worse. You'll be trapped between worlds, neither alive nor dead, conscious but unable to move, unable to speak forever." Ricardo's mouth went dry. "You're saying this might not work." "I'm saying it probably won't work. The odds are against you, against us." Sofía's black eyes held his. "I'm giving you the chance to walk away. Leave now. Go back to your life. I'll understand." Ricardo thought about it, really thought about it. He could gather up his things, break the salt circle, walk out of this basement, and never come back. Find a new job, move to a different city, leave Sofía and Tomas and all these trapped souls to their eternal prison, save himself. But he'd still see them. Marta had been clear about that. Once you see the dead, you can't unsee them. They'd find him wherever he went. And worse, he'd know he'd abandoned Sofía, left her here because he was afraid. Ricardo Morales had lost a lot in his 32 years, his parents, his marriage, his dignity, but he hadn't lost his humanity, not yet. "I'm not leaving," he said. "I'm seeing this through." Sofía closed her eyes, a strange sight on a face that hadn't blinked until now. "Thank you. Whatever happens, thank you for trying." She stood and moved back into the shadows. The other spirits watched her go. Then they turned their attention back to Ricardo, waiting. Hopeful and hungry in equal measure, Ricardo checked his watch. 12:47 a.m., less than 90 minutes until 2:17. 1:30 a.m., Tomas arrives. The temperature plummeted. In seconds, it went from cold to Arctic. Ricardo's breath came out in thick clouds. Frost formed on the concrete, spreading outward from the stairwell in crystalline patterns. The candle flames bent and wavered but didn't go out. Tomas Ruiz descended the stairs slowly, deliberately. Each footstep echoed like a hammer blow. He was more solid than before, more real. His obsession and rage had given him strength. He looked almost alive except for the eyes, those empty, hollow eyes. "You're making a mistake," Tomas said, his voice filling the basement. "She's mine. I killed for her. I died for her. That makes her mine forever." "That's not how it works," Ricardo called back, trying to keep his voice steady. "Love doesn't work like that. You murdered her. You're her jailer, not her lover." Tomas laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You're young. You don't understand. When you love someone completely, totally, you'll do anything to keep them. Anything." He moved closer, circling the salt ring. "Your wife left you, didn't she, Gabriela? She couldn't handle your emptiness, your neediness. You drove her away." Ricardo's jaw clenched. "You don't know anything about that." "I know everything about you, Ricardo Morales. I've been watching you for weeks, since before you even started working here. I made sure Miguel quit, made sure the position was empty, made sure you'd be the one to take it." Tomas smiled, showing teeth that were too white, too perfect. "I needed someone with a gift, someone who could see Sofía, because I wanted her to have hope. I wanted her to think she could escape. And then I wanted to crush that hope. Make her understand that she can never leave me." Ricardo's blood ran cold. You set this up, all of it. I orchestrated it. I'm not just a ghost boy, I'm something more. My obsession gave me power. My rage gave me control. I run this place. Every spirit here answers to me." Tomas spread his arms, addressing the other spirits. "Don't you tell him?" The spirits didn't respond. They just watched, their expressions unreadable. Tomas's smile faltered. "Tell him," he roared. Silence. Then the old man with the cut throat spoke. "You don't own us, Tomas. You never did. You're just louder than the rest of us, angrier, but you're still trapped same as we are, and we're tired of it, tired of you. If this boy can free us, we're going, all of us." "No." Tomas's form flickered like a bad television signal. "No. If you all leave, I'll be alone. I can't. I won't. You should have thought of that before you killed her," the old man said quietly. "Before you killed yourself. Actions have consequences even for the dead." Tomas turned his rage back to Ricardo. This is your fault. You disrupted everything. I should kill you right now." "You can't cross the salt," Ricardo said, hoping it was true. "No, but I don't have to." Tomas pointed at Ricardo's watch. "In 45 minutes, you're going to break that circle yourself. You're going to step into the center, cut yourself, and call us to you. And when you do, when you're vulnerable and bleeding and chanting your little prayer, that's when I'll take you. I'll drag you down so deep you'll never find your way back. And Sofía will watch it happen. She'll watch you die because of her. And then she'll have eternity to regret asking for your help." Tomas faded back into the shadows, his hollow eyes the last thing to disappear. Ricardo sat in his circle, heart pounding. He wanted to vomit. This was a trap. An elaborate, cruel trap. And he'd walked right into it. But what choice did he have? Turned back now, and Sofía stayed imprisoned. Forever. And all these other spirits remained trapped with her. No, he'd made his choice. He had to follow through. Ricardo picked up the obsidian knife. The blade was cold smooth, sharp enough to part flesh with barely any pressure. He pulled Marta's prayer from his pocket and reviewed it one more time. He had it memorized, but he needed to be sure. Couldn't afford a single mistake. His watch read 1:52 a.m., 25 minutes. 2:10 a.m., final preparations. The spirits were gathering now, coming out of the shadows, forming a circle around Ricardo's salt ring. He counted them, 30, 40, more emerging from the darkness with each passing second. Some looked human. Others barely resembled anything that had once lived. They didn't speak. They just watched with dead eyes, waiting for 2:17, waiting for the door to open. Sofía stood at the forefront. She looked at Ricardo with something that might have been pity or regret, hard to tell on that expressionless face. "It's not too late," she said one last time. "You can still leave." "I know," Ricardo replied, "but I won't. You're going to die. Maybe, probably." Ricardo smiled, though it felt wrong on his face. "But at least I'll die doing something that matters. That's more than I could say yesterday." Sofía seemed to understand. She nodded once, then stepped back to let the ritual begin. Ricardo checked his watch. 2:14 a.m., 3 minutes, 3. He picked up the clay jar of blessed earth and placed it directly in front of him. He laid the ancient crucifix on top of the earth. He held the obsidian knife in his right hand blade against his left palm. He began to read the prayer aloud slowly, letting each word resonate. "Almas atadas las llamo, espíritus encadenados los invoco, por la tierra bendita ofrezco purificación, por la cruz sagrada señalo el camino, por mi sangre abro la puerta. Bound souls, I call you, chained spirits, I invoke you. Through blessed earth I offer purification. Through the sacred cross I point the way. Through my blood I open the door." The temperature dropped further. Impossible cold. Ricardo's lips were numb, making the words difficult to form. But he continued, "En el nombre de los santos, en el nombre de los ancestros, en el nombre de los que vinieron antes, escuchen mi voz. La prisión se abre, el camino se ilumina. Pasen." "In the name of the saints, in the name of the ancestors, in the name of those who came before, hear my voice." The prison opens, the path illuminates. Pass through Ricardo's watch beeped. 2:17 a.m., the exact moment of Sofía's death 7 years ago. Ricardo pressed the obsidian blade into his palm and pulled. 2:17 a.m., the ritual blood welled up from the cut, dark and hot. Ricardo gasped at the pain, sharper than he'd expected, deeper. He turned his hand over and let the blood drip onto the blessed earth. 1 drop, 2, 3. The earth began to glow, faintly at first, then brighter. White light emanated from it, pushing back the shadows. The crucifix on top of the earth shone like it was reflecting sunlight, though there was no sun in this underground tomb. The basement floor cracked, a sound like thunder, like the earth itself splitting open. The crack originated from beneath Ricardo and spread outward, running under the salt circle extending toward all the spirits gathered around him. And from the crack, light poured out. Pure white light, warm and welcoming. It smelled like rain and flowers and fresh earth. It smelled like life. The spirits moved toward it, instinctively drawn like moths to flame. Their faces changed, those who still had faces. The hunger faded. Something like peace took its place. Ricardo continued the prayer, his voice growing stronger despite the pain in his hand. "Por mi sangre me convierto en el puente, por mi vida sostengo la puerta, almas perdidas caminen, espíritus atrapados sean libres, vayan hacia la luz, vayan en paz. Through my blood I become the bridge, through my life I hold the door. Lost souls walk, trapped spirits be free, go toward the light, go in peace." The first spirit stepped into the light, the old man with the cut throat. His form solidified as he approached the crack, becoming more real, more alive. He looked at Ricardo one last time. "Gracias," he whispered. "Thank you." Then he stepped into the light and vanished, simply ceased to exist in this world. More spirits followed. The drowned child, the broken woman. One by one they walked into the crack, into the light, and disappeared. Each one thanked Ricardo as they passed. Each one left with something like smiles on their dead faces. Ricardo felt it. Felt each departure like something pulling at his chest, at his life force. Each spirit took a little bit of him as they crossed. Not much, just a thread. But there were so many of them. 40 spirits, 50, 60. Ricardo's vision began to blur. He kept reading the prayer, but his voice was weakening. His hand still bled, dripping onto the earth, keeping the door open. But the cost was mounting. He could feel himself being drained, like his life was a tank with a slow leak. Each spirit widened the leak just a little more. 70 spirits. 80. Ricardo swayed. He braced himself with his uncut hand, trying to stay upright. Had to finish the ritual. Had to keep the door open long enough for Sofía to cross. Where was she? He couldn't see her anymore. Too many spirits between them. Too much light and shadow and movement. 90 spirits. Ricardo's hand slipped. He caught himself before falling completely, but blood smeared across the blessed earth. The light flickered. "No!" he gasped. "Not yet. Just a little more." And then Sofía was there, kneeling beside him on the other side of the salt line. "Ricardo," she said urgently, "you have to stop. You're dying. Your body can't take much more." "Just you," Ricardo managed. "Just need to get you through. There are still spirits left. 20, 30. If you try to send them all through, you'll die before the last one crosses. Don't care. Not leaving anyone behind. Ricardo, go!" Ricardo shouted, using the last of his strength. "Walk into the light now." Sofía stared at him. Those black eyes that had been so terrifying now looked impossibly sad. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I asked this of you." "Don't apologize. Just go. Please." Sofía stood. She looked back at the remaining spirits, the stragglers, the fearful ones, the ones who'd been dead so long they'd forgotten what life looked like. She called to them, "Come on, all of you. This is our only chance. If we don't go now, we never will." The spirits hesitated. Then they moved. Slowly at first, then faster, rushing toward the light, desperate not to be left behind. They flowed past Sofía, past Ricardo's circle, and into the crack, into freedom. 100 spirits, 110. Ricardo couldn't hold himself up anymore. He collapsed onto his side, his bleeding hand still extended over the blessed earth, still keeping the door open through sheer force of will. The world was fading, going gray at the edges. His heartbeat was slowing, irregular. He could feel it, feel his body shutting down, giving everything it had to maintain the bridge. 120. "Almost," he whispered. "Almost." Sofía was the last. She stood at the edge of the crack, the light illuminating her from behind. For just a moment the black faded from her eyes. Ricardo caught a glimpse of what she'd looked like in life. Brown eyes, warm, human, beautiful. "Thank you, Ricardo Morales," she said. "I'll remember you. Always." She stepped into the light and vanished. The crack sealed. The light cut off. The blessed earth stopped glowing. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. Ricardo lay on the cold concrete, barely conscious. His hand still bled, forming a pool on the floor. The candles flickered. The salt circle remained intact. He'd done it, freed them all. But the cost? Ricardo could feel it, feel how much of himself he'd given away. He was alive but changed, diminished in some fundamental way, like a part of his soul had been carved out and given to the dead. He tried to sit up, couldn't. His body wouldn't respond. He managed to turn his head, looking around the basement. Empty. Completely empty. No spirits, no shadows, no watching eyes. They were all gone. Free. Ricardo closed his eyes, expecting death to take him, hoping it would be quick, painless. But death didn't come. Instead, he felt hands on him, cold hands, lifting him. Ricardo forced his eyes open. Tomás Ruiz stood over him, a smile on that dead face. "Congratulations," Tomás said. "You freed them all. Every spirit that was trapped here, except one." Ricardo's stomach dropped. "No." "Oh, yes. You see, I wasn't lying when I said I had power here, special power. Sofía and the others were bound by the cursed ground, but I—" Tomás knelt beside Ricardo. "I'm bound by something stronger. I'm bound by obsession, by love that turned to rot. And that kind of binding your little ritual can't touch it." "You're still here," Ricardo whispered. "I'm still here. And now so are you." Tomás grabbed Ricardo's injured hand. His grip was ice agony. "You opened a door, boy, became a bridge." "But bridges work both ways. And while you were so focused on sending spirits through to the other side, you didn't notice me doing this." Tomas pressed his thumb into Ricardo's bleeding palm, pushing deep into the wound. Ricardo screamed. The pain was beyond physical. It burned through his nerves, his bones, his soul. He felt something being pushed into him, something cold and wrong and hateful, a mark. Tomas was marking him. "There," Tomas said, releasing Ricardo's hand. "Now you're bound too, not to this place. Worse, you're bound to me, and through me to all the dead who know what you can do. They'll find you, Ricardo, everywhere you go. Every lost soul, every vengeful spirit, every ghost that can't find peace, they'll come to you, beg you for help. And you won't be able to refuse, because now you're not just a seer, you're a door, and doors can't choose who walks through them." Ricardo stared at his hand. In his palm, where the cut had been, there was now a mark. A symbol burned into his flesh. It looked like an eye, an open eye that wept blood. "No!" Ricardo sobbed. "No, no, no!" "Yes," Tomas stood. "Welcome to eternity, Ricardo Morales. You saved Sofía, you saved them all, but you couldn't save yourself. And now you'll spend the rest of your life paying the price." Tomas began to fade. But unlike the other spirits, he didn't vanish completely. He became translucent, hovering at the edge of visibility. "I'll be watching," Tomas said. His voice echoed even as he disappeared. "Always watching. You and me, we're connected now. Where you go, I go. And every time you help another spirit cross over, you'll remember you created me. You made me permanent. Your mercy doomed us both." Then he was gone. Ricardo lay alone in the basement, the candles burning down to stubs, salt scattered across the floor. He stared at the mark on his palm, the eye that wouldn't stop bleeding. He'd freed Sofía, freed them all. But he'd trapped himself. The ritual was complete, the price was paid, and the worst part, Ricardo could feel them already. Other spirits, distant but approaching, drawn to the beacon he'd become, the door he'd opened in himself. They were coming. They were all coming. And he would never be alone again. Ricardo didn't remember leaving Plaza del Sol. He had fragmented memories, dragging himself up the stairs one agonizing step at a time. The container office door hanging open. His car keys slipping from his bloody hand twice before he got the door unlocked. Driving through empty streets as dawn broke over Toluca, painting the sky pink and gold. Beautiful. It was beautiful. And he felt nothing. He made it back to his apartment at 6:47 a.m. The sun was fully up, warm on his skin, but the cold from B1 remained. Not just in his throat anymore. Everywhere. In his bones. In his blood. In the marrow of who he was. Ricardo stumbled through his front door and locked it behind him. 3 deadbolts. As if locks could keep out what was coming. His left hand throbbed. He looked down at it. The cut from the obsidian knife had sealed, but the mark remained. The eye. It stared up at him from his palm, still weeping thin trails of blood that should have dried but didn't. He went to the bathroom and ran the tap. Hot water. He held his hand under the stream, trying to wash away the mark. The blood rinsed off easily enough, spiraling down the drain, but the symbol stayed, burned into his flesh, permanent. Ricardo grabbed soap, scrubbed at the mark until his palm was raw. The eye didn't fade, didn't blur. If anything, it became clearer, more defined. He gave up, turned off the water, wrapped his hand in gauze from the medicine cabinet. The white bandage immediately spotted red. Ricardo looked at himself in the mirror. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. Gray skin, hollow cheeks, eyes sunken deep in their sockets. His lips were cracked and bloodless. He looked like a corpse. "No," Ricardo whispered to his reflection. "I'm alive. I'm still alive." But was he? He'd given so much of his life force to keep that door open. 121 spirits had crossed through him, each one taking a thread of his life. How much was left? Ricardo pressed his fingers to his throat, feeling for a pulse. There, faint but present, beating too slow. 40 beats per minute, maybe less. That wasn't right. A resting heart rate should be 60 to 100, but he was alive. That had to count for something. He stumbled to his bedroom and collapsed on the bed fully clothed, not bothering to remove his boots. His body felt like lead. Sleep pulled at him dark and complete. But before unconsciousness took him, he heard it. A whisper, not from the room, from inside his head. "Thank you," Sofia's voice. "One last time." Ricardo smiled. Despite everything, despite the cost, he'd done it. She was free. Then sleep claimed him. 2:17 p.m. The dreams. Ricardo woke to his alarm and immediately wished he hadn't. The dreams had been terrible. Not nightmares, exactly. Memories. Other people's memories. He'd dreamed through the deaths of 121 people. Felt what they felt in their final moments. The old man's throat being cut. The woman's neck snapping. The child drowning, lungs burning, water filling spaces meant for air. The gunshot victims, the stabbing victims, the ones who died slowly of disease. The ones who died in fires, in car crashes, in falls, every single death that had occurred on that cursed ground over 70 years. Ricardo had lived through all of them in 6 hours of sleep. He rolled out of bed and vomited into the trash can beside his nightstand, again and again until nothing came up but bile. When the retching finally stopped, Ricardo lay on the floor trembling. The memories were already fading. The human mind wasn't meant to hold that much trauma, but they left echoes. Impressions. A bone-deep understanding of what death felt like from 121 different perspectives. His phone was ringing. He'd been ignoring it in his sleep. Now he crawled across the floor and grabbed it from where it had fallen. 15 missed calls. 10 voicemails. All from the same number, Fernando, the construction site manager. Ricardo didn't want to listen, but he forced himself to play the most recent message. "Ricardo, where the hell are you? You didn't sign out this morning. Your car was gone when I got here at 7, but the logbook just says you started your shift. No completion time, no status report, and B1. Jesus, Ricardo, what happened down there? There's salt everywhere, candles melted all over the floor, and there's blood, a lot of blood. The engineers are saying we need to shut down, maybe bring in police. Call me back immediately, this is serious." Ricardo ended the call. He couldn't deal with that. Couldn't explain what had happened without sounding insane. He checked the time. 2:17 p.m. Of course. That number would haunt him forever now. Another message notification. Text this time. From a number he didn't recognize. "I know what you did, I know what you are. M. Marta." Had to be. Ricardo texted back with shaking fingers. "It worked, but there's a cost." The reply came immediately. "There always is. Come see me when you're ready to understand what you've become." What he'd become. Ricardo looked at his bandaged hand, at the blood seeping through, at his reflection in the darkened phone screen, that corpse face staring back. He'd become a door. That's what Thomas had said. A bridge between worlds. And now the dead would come to him forever seeking passage. Ricardo wanted to scream, to rage, to throw his phone against the wall and watch it shatter. But he was too tired, too empty. Instead, he stood on wobbly legs and walked to the bathroom. He needed a shower. Needed to wash away the feeling of death that clung to his skin like oil. 3:30 p.m. The reflection. Ricardo stood under water as hot as he could tolerate. It scalded his skin pink, but the cold inside remained. He scrubbed himself raw with a washcloth, trying to feel clean. It didn't work. The mark on his hand throbbed under the bandage. He'd rewrapped it before showering, but water still seeped through. When he finally turned off the tap and unwound the gauze, the eye stared up at him, wet and red and unblinking. Ricardo dried off and wrapped the hand fresh. Then he stood before the bathroom mirror, wiping away the steam. His reflection appeared, and behind it, barely visible, were others. Shadows, human-shaped, dozens of them, standing behind him in a bathroom too small to hold even one extra person. They weren't detailed, just dark silhouettes. But he could feel their presence, feel them watching. the spirits he'd freed. They weren't gone, not entirely. They'd left impressions on him, stains on his soul. They'd passed through him to reach the light, but parts of them had stayed behind. Memories, essence, fragments of who they'd been. Ricardo closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the shadows remained. "I can't do this," he whispered. "I can't live like this." No one answered. The shadows just watched, silent witnesses to his breakdown. Ricardo left the bathroom and dressed in clean clothes, jeans, t-shirt, his grandmother's crucifix around his neck. He hadn't removed it even to shower. He sat on his bed and stared at the wall, trying to figure out what to do next. He couldn't go back to Plaza del Sol. That much was certain. They'd ask questions he couldn't answer. And even if the construction company didn't fire him, he couldn't spend another night in that basement, not after what had happened. He needed a new job. New city, maybe. Somewhere far from Toluca and its ghosts. But even as he thought it, Ricardo knew it wouldn't work. The mark on his hand ensured that. Wherever he went, the dead would find him. Thomas had made sure of that. "Where you go, I go." Ricardo looked around his apartment. Was Thomas here now? Watching from some invisible corner, the thought made his skin crawl. A knock at the door. Ricardo jumped. His heart, already beating too slow, skipped entirely for a moment before resuming its sluggish rhythm. Another knock, 3 sharp raps. "If you hear 3 knocks, don't answer." Miguel's warning, from a lifetime ago, from before Ricardo understood what it meant. "Who is it?" Ricardo called, his voice hoarse. No answer, just silence. Then so quiet he almost missed it. "Please, I need help." A woman's voice, young, frightened. Not Sofía, someone else. Ricardo approached the door slowly, looked through the peephole. The hallway outside was empty, no one there. But the voice came again, seeming to originate from right against the door. "I can't find my way home. It's so dark. Please help me." "I can't," Ricardo said through the door. "I'm sorry, I can't help you." "But you helped her. You helped Sofía. Why not me?" "Because I barely survived helping her, because I gave everything I had and it still wasn't enough." Silence. Then, "I'm alone. I've been alone for so long, just like she was. Don't you understand what that's like? Being alone." Ricardo pressed his forehead against the door. He did understand. He understood perfectly. That's why he'd helped Sofía. Because loneliness was a wound that never healed, and 7 years of it, of being trapped and isolated and forgotten, would drive anyone to desperation. "What's your name?" Ricardo asked quietly. "Ana. Ana Herrera. I died in 2019. I'm buried under a building on Avenida Juarez. They're planning to demolish it next month. If they do, if they break the ground, I'll be lost forever. Scattered. I won't even be able to haunt properly. I'll just stop existing." "How did you find me?" "Sofía told me." "Before she crossed over, she said you're someone who can see us, someone who cares. She said if I needed help, I should find Ricardo Morales." A pause. Was she wrong? Don't you care? Ricardo closed his eyes. Sofía, even in her final moments, even crossing into eternal rest, she'd thought of others still trapped. She'd sent them to him. This was the price, not just the mark on his hand, not just the shadows in his reflection. This was the real cost of opening that door. Every spirit who heard about him would come seeking help. And how could he refuse? How could he turn away people, dead people, but still people who were suffering? He couldn't. That's why Thomas had marked him. Because Thomas understood that Ricardo's compassion was his greatest weakness. He would help them. He'd destroy himself, helping them one spirit at a time until there was nothing left. "I can't open the door," Ricardo said. "I'm sorry, Ana. I'm too weak right now. But I'll find you. Give me a few days to recover. I'll find your building. I'll do what I can." Silence, then. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll be waiting." The presence at the door faded. Ricardo could feel it leaving like pressure releasing from his eardrums. He slid down to the floor and sat with his back against the door. 2 days out of B1, and already another spirit had found him. How long before the next? How long before he was drowning in requests from the dead Ricardo looked at his bandaged hand, at the blood still seeping through. He needed help, real help, not just guidance on rituals. He needed to understand what he'd become, what he could do, what the limitations were. He needed Marta. 5:00 p.m. Returned to Cerro de la Cruz. The drive up the winding road to Marta's house felt different than before. Then Ricardo had been afraid but determined. Now he was just hollow, emptied out. The sun was setting, painting the hills in shades of orange and purple. Beautiful. Everything was beautiful, and Ricardo felt none of it. Like that part of him, the part that appreciated beauty, that felt joy, had been given away to the dead. He parked in front of Marta's house. The wind chimes made their bone music in the evening breeze. Before he could get out of the car, the front door opened. Marta stood there, backlit by candlelight from inside. She didn't look surprised. "I felt you coming," she said. "The dead announce you now." Ricardo climbed out of the car and approached. "What does that mean?" "It means spirits sense you from miles away. They're drawn to you like compass needles to north. Come inside. We need to talk." The interior of Marta's house was exactly as Ricardo remembered, shelves of jars and bones, candles burning, the heavy smell of herbs and smoke. But now he saw more. Shadows in the corners. Not threatening, just present. Marta had her own dead around her. Guardians, maybe, or advisors. She gestured for him to sit at the small table. He did, moving slowly. Everything hurt. Not physical pain, something deeper, soul deep. Marta sat across from him and took his bandaged hand. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing the mark. The eye looked back at them both. "Dios mío," Marta breathed. "He marked you. I warned you about the danger, but I didn't expect this." "What is it exactly?" Ricardo asked. "Tomas said I'm a door now, that the dead will come to me forever." "He's partially right." Marta traced the symbol with one finger, not quite touching it. "This is an ancient mark, older than Christianity, older than the Aztecs. It's called El Ojo del Psychopompo, the Eye of the Psychopomp. In mythology, psychopomps are guides who lead souls from life to death. Hermes, Anubis, the Valkyries, you've become one. I don't want to be one. It's too late for that. The mark is permanent. It's burned into your soul, not just your flesh. Even if you cut off your hand, it would appear somewhere else on your body." Marta released his hand and sat back. "You opened a door for 121 souls. That kind of service doesn't go unnoticed. The universe marked you as someone who can be trusted to do it again." The universe or Tomas? Both. Tomas used his residual power to physically create the mark, but the mark only took because you'd already done the work, already proven yourself. He just made permanent what was already happening. Marta stood and moved to one of her shelves. "The question now is, what will you do with it? Can I refuse? Can I tell the dead no? You can try. But it will eat at you. You'll know they're suffering, and you'll know you have the power to help. How long can you live with that guilt?" She returned with a small leather journal, very old. "Your grandmother kept records. Every spirit she helped cross over, every ritual she performed, 93 spirits in her lifetime, and she lived to be 78. She did this for her entire life. From age 20, when she first helped a spirit, until the day she died." Marta opened the journal. The pages were covered in handwriting, names, dates, locations. "She wanted you to have this. Left it with me before she passed. Said, if Ricardo ever sees what I see, give him this. Tell him he's not cursed. He's blessed with terrible purpose." Ricardo took the journal with trembling hands. His grandmother's handwriting, names of people he'd never met dead decades before he was born, and she'd helped them all. How did she not go mad? Ricardo whispered. "Who says she didn't?" Marta smiled sadly. "She struggled, Ricardo. Some years were harder than others. She'd go months without helping anyone, trying to live a normal life. But the dead always found her, and she always helped, because that's who she was, who you are. I'm not her. I'm not strong enough. You freed 121 spirits in one night. You nearly died doing it, but you didn't stop until they were all safe. You're stronger than you know. Marta placed something else on the table, a small silver ring. This was hers, too. It won't stop the dead from finding you, but it will help you control when you see them. Wear it when you need a break, when you need to pretend to be normal for a while. Ricardo picked up the ring. It was simple, unadorned, but warm to the touch. He slipped it onto his right hand. Immediately, the shadows in the corners faded. Not gone, he could still sense them, but less visible. The constant awareness of the dead dimmed to a low hum instead of a scream. "Thank you," Ricardo breathed. "Don't thank me yet. You have a long road ahead. Ana Herrera is just the first. There will be hundreds more, maybe thousands in your lifetime." Marta gripped his shoulder. "But know this, you're not alone. There are others like us, others with the gift. Some use it for good, like your grandmother. Others abuse it, but we exist, and we help each other when we can. How do I find them? They'll find you. The mark announces you to the dead, but it also announces you to the living who see the dead. Will feel you coming just as I did." She squeezed his shoulder once, then released him. "For now, rest. Recover your strength. You gave away too much in that ritual. It will take time to regenerate." "How long?" "Weeks, maybe a month. During that time, avoid major rituals, small hauntings you can handle, giving directions, offering comfort, but nothing that requires opening doors." Marta walked him to the entrance. "And Ricardo, visit me regularly. You'll need guidance. You'll need someone who understands. I'm here." Ricardo left Cerro de la Cruz as the last light faded from the sky. He clutched his grandmother's journal and wore her ring. The mark on his hand throbbed under fresh bandages. The dead were waiting for him. He could feel them. Not just Ana, but others, drawn to the beacon he'd become. But for tonight, thanks to the ring, he could pretend not to notice. He could drive home and sleep and wake up to a world that looked normal, even if he knew the truth. Tomorrow he'd start figuring out how to live this new life, this cursed, blessed life. Tonight he just wanted to rest. 1 week later, the pattern begins. Ricardo found work at a hospital, San Jose Hospital on the east side of Toluca. Day shift security this time. He couldn't handle nights anymore. Not after B1. The job was quieter than Plaza del Sol. Just checking badges, walking rounds, making sure visitors didn't wander into restricted areas. Normal work. Human work. Except hospitals were full of death. Ricardo saw them everywhere, dead patients who didn't realize they'd passed, spirits of doctors and nurses who died decades ago but never left. The ghost of a child in the pediatric ward playing with toys that rolled on their own. He wore his grandmother's ring constantly. It helped, made the dead translucent, easy to ignore. He could function, could smile at living coworkers, could pretend he was just another security guard. But at night when he took off the ring, they came. Not into his apartment, his grandmother's crucifix hung over the door, creating a barrier, but they waited outside. In the hallway, on the street, watching his windows with empty eyes. Ricardo started keeping track like his grandmother had. Names, stories, how they died, what they needed. Ana Herrera had been the first. Ricardo had helped her on his third night home from the hospital. Just a small ritual blessed water, a prayer directing her spirit toward the light. She'd crossed over easily, gratefully whispering thanks as she faded. That had been easy. But not all of them were so simple. Some spirits were angry, some were confused. Some had been dead so long they'd forgotten their own names, forgotten what they were becoming, just echoes of trauma and rage. Those Ricardo couldn't help, not yet. He wasn't strong enough. He wrote them down anyway, kept records. Angry man in construction clothes, Avenida Madero. Possibly died in the 1980s. Needs more research. His grandmother's journal became his template. He used the same format, the same careful notes, building a catalog of the dead. By the end of the first week, he'd logged 15 spirits. Helped 3 cross over. The rest were too complex, required resources he didn't have. But he'd helped three. 3 souls who'd been trapped who were now free. That had to count for something. 2:17 a.m. The voice Ricardo was dreaming again. Not memories of death this time, those had faded to bearable levels, just normal dreams. He was at a beach somewhere, warm sand, blue water, peace. Then his phone rang. Ricardo woke disoriented. The bedroom was dark except for his phone screen glowing on the nightstand. 2:17 a.m. Always that time. Always. The caller ID showed unknown. Ricardo answered. Hello? Heavy breathing. Then a voice he recognized. Deep, rough, full of malice. Did you think you were done with me, Ricardo? Tomas. Ricardo's blood turned to ice. How did you get my number? I told you. Where you go, I go. I'm in your shadow now. In your reflection. In every dark corner of your life. A sound like laughter, wet and cruel. How many have you helped since Sofía 3-4? Each one strengthens the mark. Each one binds you tighter to this curse. It's not a curse. I'm helping people. You're helping the dead. What about the living? What about you? Tomas's voice dropped lower. You gave away too much in that basement, boy. Your heart beats 40 times a minute now. Your body temperature is 3 degrees below normal. You sleep 4 hours a night and wake up exhausted. You're dying, Ricardo. Slowly. Every spirit you help takes a little more. You're lying. Am I check your pulse, check your temperature? You know I'm right. Ricardo didn't want to, but he pressed his fingers to his throat anyway, counted beats. 38 per minute. That wasn't possible. That wasn't sustainable. You'll be dead in a year, Tomas said cheerfully. Maybe 2 if you're lucky. Unless you stop, unless you refuse to help them. I won't stop. Then you'll die. And when you do, you'll become one of us. One of the spirits you love so much. And I'll be waiting for you, Ricardo. Waiting to show you what eternity really means. The breathing grew closer, as if Thomas were pressing his mouth directly against the phone. I'll make you regret freeing Sofía. I'll make you regret everything. That's my promise. The call disconnected. Ricardo sat in the darkness phone, still pressed to his ear, listening to silence. His hand found his throat again, found that too slow pulse. Tomas wasn't lying. Ricardo could feel it. Feel his life force slowly depleting. The price of being a door. How long did he have? A year, too. What happened when his heart finally gave out? Would he cross over peacefully? Or would he be trapped like Sofía had been? Ricardo looked at the mark on his palm. The eye stared back unblinking. Blessed with terrible purpose, his grandmother had said. But she'd lived to 78. She'd found a balance somehow. A way to help the dead without destroying herself. Ricardo needed to find that balance. And fast. Because Tomas was right about one thing, he was dying. The question was whether he'd accomplish something meaningful before the end, or whether he'd just burn out like a candle consumed by the very gift that made him special. The mirror. Final warning. Ricardo couldn't sleep after Tomas's call. He paced his apartment wearing his grandmother's ring, trying not to see the shadows that pressed against his windows. At 4 a.m. he went to the bathroom to splash water on his face, turned on the light, looked in the mirror, and stopped. His reflection was wrong. The face looking back at him was his but older, gaunt, gray-skinned, eyes sunken so deep they were almost hollow. His hair had started going white at the temples when had that happened. He was only 32. But the reflection looked 50, 60, dying. And behind him in the mirror, clearer than they'd ever been, were the shadows. The 121 spirits who'd passed through him. They were always there now, always watching, parts of them permanently imprinted on his soul. But there was something else, someone else, a new shadow, darker than the others. Standing directly behind Ricardo's reflection, so close they should be touching. Tomas. Ricardo spun around. The bathroom was empty. He looked back at the mirror. Tomas remained in the reflection, a dark figure with hollow eyes, one hand reaching out as if to touch Ricardo's shoulder. The hand in the mirror moved closer, closer. Ricardo felt cold on his shoulder. Not physical touch, something else. like ice spreading through his shirt, his skin, his muscle. The mark on his palm burned. The eye wept, blood soaking through the bandage. "You're mine now," Thomas whispered, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Connected, bound. You'll never be free of me. And when you die, when you finally use up that guttering flame of life, I'll be waiting. We'll be together forever, you and I. Just like Sofía and I were supposed to be." Ricardo stared at his reflection, at the death written on his face, at the shadow that would never leave him. "No," he said quietly, "I won't let you win. You already lost, the moment you opened that door. Maybe, but I saved her. I saved them all, and I'll save more before I'm done. Every spirit I free is a victory against you, against death, against despair." Ricardo met Thomas's eyes in the mirror. "You wanted me to suffer, then watch me use this curse for good. Watch me help hundreds, thousands. Watch me turn your punishment into purpose." Tomas's shadow seemed to waver. Then it pulled back, receding into the deeper darkness behind Ricardo's reflection. "We'll see," came the whisper. "We'll see how long that idealism lasts, when your heart is stuttering in your chest, when you're coughing up blood, when every morning you wake up a little closer to death." Then he was gone. Ricardo stood alone in the bathroom, looking at his dying reflection. He had a year, maybe 2. What would he do with it? Epilogue. The Choice. 2 weeks after the ritual, Ricardo received a letter. Not in the mail, it simply appeared on his kitchen table while he was at work. Old paper sealed with red wax. Inside, written in elegant script, "Ricardo Morales. We know what you are. We know what you did at Plaza del Sol. 121 souls freed in a single night. Such an act has not been seen in decades. You have questions? You need training? You need community? We are Los Guyas the guides, psychopomps like yourself scattered across Mexico and beyond. We help each other, teach each other, keep each other from burning out too quickly. If you wish to learn how to use your gift without destroying yourself, come to the address below. First Saturday of next month, midnight. We'll be waiting." MV below was an address in Mexico City, a church by the name Iglesia de los Santos Olvidados, Church of the Forgotten Saints. Ricardo held the letter for a long time, reading and rereading it. He wasn't alone. There were others like him, others who could teach him to survive this curse, this gift. Maybe he didn't have to burn out in a year. Maybe with their help he could last longer, help more spirits, make the sacrifice worthwhile. Ricardo folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his grandmother's journal. He would go. First Saturday, midnight. But before then, he had work to do. He opened the journal to a fresh page and began writing name unknown. Location Hospital San Jose, 3rd floor, East Wing. Death apparent suicide, 1997. Status confused, nonviolent, seeking family. Next steps, research hospital records, locate family grave, prepare crossing ritual. One spirit at a time, one soul at a time. That's how he'd make this life, this shortened, cursed, blessed life, mean something. Ricardo looked at his reflection in the darkened window. The shadows were there as always. Tomas lurked somewhere in the darkness waiting. But Ricardo wasn't afraid anymore. He'd opened a door, he'd become a bridge, and bridges, he'd learned, don't just connect the dead to the light, they connect the living to purpose. Final warning. If you're listening to this story, remember there are doors that shouldn't be open. There are curses that can't be broken. And if you ever see someone that others don't see, if you hear voices calling from empty rooms, if you feel cold hands on your shoulder in the dead of night, don't answer. Don't help. Don't open that door, because once you do, you can never close it again. Ricardo Morales still lives in Toluca. He still works security at San Jose Hospital. And every night the dead come to him, dozens, hundreds, all seeking the peace he offered Sofía Mendoza. He helps them when he can, one by one, knowing each one brings him closer to his own death. But he doesn't stop, because he made a choice. To use the time he has left, whether it's 1 year or 10, to stand between the living and the dead, to guide lost souls home. That's the price of the gift. That's the cost of compassion. And when Ricardo Morales finally dies, when his too slow heart takes its last stuttering beat, he'll become one of them, one of the spirits he spent his life helping. Will he find peace, or will Tomas be waiting ready to claim him for eternity? Nobody knows. Not yet. But one thing is certain, Ricardo isn't afraid of death anymore, because he knows what lies beyond. He's seen 121 people cross that threshold. He's seen the light that waits on the other side. And when his time comes, he'll walk into it knowing he did something that mattered, that he saved them, even if he couldn't save himself. This is Ricardo Morales' story, a warning, a testament, a reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come with the greatest costs. And sometimes the only way to find your purpose is to lose yourself in service of others. May the dead rest in peace. May the living find strength. And may those who walk between worlds, the psychopomps, the guides, the cursed and blessed alike, may they find the courage to carry their terrible burden, because someone has to stand at the threshold, someone has to open the door, someone has to say, "Come, the way is open, the light is waiting, you're not alone anymore." That someone was Ricardo Morales, and his work is not yet finished.